Well, hey everyone, time for Geocache Talk. Whether at work, in the car, wherever you are, we hope you enjoy the show. Please go like and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, and now Spotify. You get all the weekly Geocache Talk goodness. Big thanks to the Trail Bugs for the music and our patrons, Demon Hunter 2, Aggie Jedi Master, Electric Water Boy, Antaeus, Joshua, the geocaching vlogger, Nick at Cashley, One Kind Word, Ravenclaw Tia, Shermanator 18, Butterfly Girl, Loon Trackers, the Aussie Geocacher, Sodak Zach, the Deadliest Cachers, Terrell 2, Neil Moore, Team D&D, Geocaching Adam, Peachy 1276, the No Code Geocachers, Curiosity Girl, Tick Magnet, Marsipanic, Bricker John, Fire Safe, FS Sabero, Geo Rick, Cache Addict Mel, Geocaching Janji, the Geocaching Junkie, Sir Dremelot, Janice, Tricasius, Tom Frey, Rugels, the Bruce Zero, EGK PBR, Casamaya, Master Sergeant USMC, Little Gears, Albedo 0.39, It's Only Barney, Purple Turtles 3, and ACDC Family. If you'd like to become a patron, head on over to patreon.com/geocache talk for more details. Patrons get path tags, coins, swag, and new exclusive videos, as well as invites to special events only for patrons. Support levels start at as little as $3 a month. Well, let me start. Got a big show tonight, as we usually do, but tonight we have a very special show. So let me start by welcoming my co-host, Jesse.
Good evening, and we've already got the chat room fired up for Planetary Pursuit, and everybody's ready. Somebody said Miss Pac-Man forever already, so
all right.
I think they know what's going on tonight.
Did they put Ms. Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man?
Oh, you know what? I better double check.
Better check, because there was that's interesting. I guess an interesting story, right?
MS, no period, no R.
Yeah, that's Ms. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump right to show 92 for April 1st. So welcome back to the show, Doug Macrae. Welcome back to Geocache Talk.
Thank you, Gary. Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too, man. We're gonna do some news, and we're gonna talk a lot of cool stuff. So I need to start with a name correction, and we just lost Doug. I'm sure he'll be back here in a moment.
Yeah.
He pushed the wrong button. He'll be back in a second, which gives us time to do a little bit of news. So last week, of course, you know me, I botched names. There's Doug.
There's Doug.
So the news, Doug, as you probably heard on a few of the shows we've done, and Jesse knows this very well, if there's a wrong way to say a GC name, I'm going to find it. And so I found one we talked about last week, and I pronounced it all wrong. And so I'm going to fix it tonight. Terra Viators, not Terra Viators or anything else. It's Terra Viators. I think it's like aviators, but they're cachers, so they're doing Terra, so it's Terra Viators.
So Gary, I'll let you off the hook a little bit. I think I butchered it worse than you did.
I don't know.
And then I tried to correct it, which made it even worse.
It made it even worse.
So I said it like 3 different ways wrong. So,
oh well, that's okay. We
That's
corrected
right.
it. So another quick note, we did get a blog in recently, and I just want to mention again, if you've got a blog with a B, send it in. You can send it to geocachetalk@gmail.com, and we will get it over to Geocaching Janji. Angie's the one who's taking care of those for us, and she's doing a fantastic job of managing that, as well as managing our Instagram. And we have Instagram winner tonight. We'll talk about who wins the coin, the very cool coin that Doug had made. Gosh, Doug, you made that. It's been a while back now. So do you remember when?
I think it's about 6 years old now, the coin.
6 years now? Wow. I love this coin. Yeah, there's something cool about the
very rare, limited coin too. Very sought after coin.
Very sought after. Yeah. You can't make any more of them. No, I'm kidding, Doug. Don't make any more of them. They're very, very rare. All right. So over to Jesse, who gives our webcam watch.
So not much has changed. So that's a good thing. We're still at 114 in the United States, 279 total. and 4 disabled. So those 4 are staying disabled. Hopefully, at least they haven't disappeared. It'd be nice if they came back, but at least they haven't disappeared so far.
Well, that's something, and something we keep pushing for. We'd love to see webcams come back. I don't know.
Maybe a limited release like they did,
Yeah.
With, I would assume that wouldn't be till 2019, but even if they did it, that would be pretty neat.
Yeah,
I mean, the old ones fresh.
Right. And the old one, we haven't talked about it yet too much, but the virtuals they put out last year are going to not be. They're going to go out here pretty soon where you can't do them. So that's another story.
No. Yes, you can't put. Let's make sure we say this right before we get a mob on our hands. The limited 4,000 they released is a time limit to release. Publish them.
Time limit to publish.
They're not going away though. The ones that are published.
No. But if you want to get one out, if you were,
we're gonna get some hate mail.
If you were given one and you want to put it out, there's a limited time to publish it. So
right.
Good.
I don't even know what they're up to now for the numbers on that.
I'll look it up here in a minute.
Okay.
We got on our website. So, all right. Enough of that. Let's get into the show with Doug. But Doug, we're gonna get into the 7th continent discussion in a minute. But show 28, and it's been a while now since show 28. That was back December 18th of 2016. Doug was on the show, and we talked about the whole Ms. Pac-Man and his days at MIT. The young college days, right, Doug?
Long time ago.
Oh, no, wasn't that long ago? Well, okay, maybe. It's been a while. I understand. It's been a long time for me, too. So we're not going to do the whole show over again of that one. Go watch show 28 to get a lot of that. But I do want to talk about a couple things. One is an article I found that was published fairly recently with fastcompany.com, which has, I think it's some cool articles on fastcompany.com. It came out in December, called the MIT Dropouts Who Created Ms. Pac-Man, a 35th anniversary oral history. I thought that was a great article. I don't know. Did you enjoy that article that they?
Yes, it was actually quite well done. They contacted a few of us to get comments, and I think that's why they called it an oral history.
Okay.
But it was being done 35 years after the fact, and so all of our memories were a little foggy. Trying to pull together what happened back then was quite interesting, and I think it built the good story. Understood what we all went through at the time and all the challenges we faced.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was fascinating, and I think they got from you and I discussions. Of course, as you said, I think they got a lot of it correct. But talk a little bit about just for the folks that haven't seen that show or haven't heard much from you about the history. So talk a little bit about the paying your way through college.
Sure. I'll try doing a Ms. Pac-Man history in maybe 5 minutes. So
there you go.
Perfect. Talk fast. So it started off, I was a sophomore at MIT, and I started a business to operate a pinball machine on campus. And the pinball machine obviously had people dropping quarters in, and the quarters would then be split, the money, between me and our dorm that I was in. The money went into the party fund, so I didn't really mind it happening there because the dorm then threw great parties. But I then was doing quite well with that, bought a second pinball machine, brought on a partner, bought a video game, bought another video game, and by our senior year, we were up to 20 machines on campus. And we were operating them and paying our full MIT tuition out of quarters. We were not literally paying it in quarters. You have a little note here that $20 in quarters weighs a pound. We were known at times to have as many as $2,000 worth of quarters in our backpack. So we were carrying 100 pounds of quarters to the bank, deposited that into our checking account, and then paid our tuition that way. But it was interesting times of us operating these games on campus. And by our senior year, we thought we were on the wrong end of this. Hauling around these 100-pound sacks, even though they're worth $2,000, was still a lot of effort. We wanted to get involved in the design of them. And so rather than going anywhere on spring break, we decided to start writing video games. And the very first game we did was an enhancement kit to the game Missile Command, an old Atari game where you had to defend cities from intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the second game we did was an enhancement kit to the game Pac-Man. And our desire here was to be able to sell this enhancement kit such that a game would last much longer for an operator. Right. Pac-Man had its issues. You could play it almost forever, or actually forever, once you memorized the mazes and learned that the monsters always did the exact same thing every time. And it got boring. So we added some new features and got rid of the pattern play that people had and created an enhancement kit to the game Pac-Man such that it would solve those issues. We, long story short, ended up licensing that to Bally Midway in Chicago, and they started producing the game Ms. Pac-Man, which became the largest selling video game in the history of North America, actually passing Pac-Man in its first year.
Yeah, and everyone needs to. It is a fascinating story of just. It's very cool about the business of the video games, the craze. You know, there's a lot of neat things in there, Doug, that I think at least I found, because I grew up going to the gold mine place, is what it was called, in our local mall, and playing, Missile Command and all those various games. And I don't think they ever had any enhancement kits, which I think was a cool idea that you guys did that, because it really did. It really did kind of expand this idea behind what you could do with changing the game a little bit. And again,
you might not have realized that there was an enhancement kit in some of those games. What would happen to a operator is a brand new arcade game, which he just paid $2,500 for, would pull in maybe $500 a quarter the first week. And so the quick conclusion was, I'll pay this off in 5 weeks. Except for as people got better at the game, they played longer. And as they got bored, they didn't play as often. And so the next week was at 400. And the next week was at 300. And so the enhancement kits were being put out such that that problem could be solved. Right. So the first one we did, Super Missile Attack, we sold for $300. We manufactured them in our basement of the house we were renting while going to school. Right. And sold them for $300. It cost about $30 to make. And during our spring semester of our senior year, we sold about 1,000 of these.
Oh, wow.
Out of the back of a trade journal, took out a full-page color ad, but it was like a junior achievement project on steroids. Right. We made $250,000 and said, hey, this is fun. So we went on and started the second one, which was the one for Pac-Man, which became Ms. Pac-Man.
Right, which is funny because the story about, it started out as, or was Crazy Auto, then that whole thing changed.
It was a very, very, very fast timeline that when we had originally designed it as an enhancement kit, we did not have the trademark yet to Pac-Man. And so it was being called Crazy Auto as the test name. And at the very last moment, when we had brought it to Bally Midway for licensing, they looked at it and said, sequel. And as soon as it was a sequel, it was going to have the name Pac-Man in it. So it became Pac-Woman, and then Miss Pac-Man, and then Mrs. Pac-Man, and then Ms. Pac-Man. All a very storied history of switching between all of them. Miss Pac-Man, MISS, stuck around for a couple of days until people realized that in the animations between the scenes, Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man had a kid. And so they had to be married. So it switched to Mrs. And then Women's Lib at the time switched it to Ms., and it went out as Ms. Pac-Man.
Which was, which is incredible. And kind of to wrap up kind of our talk about a Pac-Man, I was reading in the article about and something that Jesse mentioned. He was familiar with the cartoon that came out. And
I love
so,
that cartoon.
Yeah. Well,
so in 1983, I believe Hanna-Barbera came out with a cartoon, the Pac Family, or the Pac-Man Hour, or whatever it was called at the time. Mm-hmm. And behind the scenes, we were heading into court to battle out the paternity or maternity rights to the Pac Family. Mm-hmm. If you remember, Pac-Man was created by Namco in Japan. We had created the mother, Ms. Pac-Man, and in the in between intermissions of Ms. Pac-Man, the stork brings out the baby.
Right.
And so we were actually in U.S. District Court in Boston arguing who owned the baby, and eventually the Pac Dog and everyone else running around on the cartoon show.
Super Pac-Man.
So I just remember the judge's face looking at it going, "You guys are arguing about a little yellow circle that runs around," and we go, "That's a valuable yellow circle."
That is right. Absolutely. When you start talking like that, so I found that interesting in the article. There was a whole deal about they started coming out with, and this is later on, they started coming out with these other things that were, Ms. Pac-Man. I was trying to find it in the article, but they were sort of, the company was trying to continue using the Pac-Man, the Ms. Pac-Man things without kind of discussing with you guys, because they were just going to continue marketing whatever they wanted to. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. we kind of have to be involved in this a little bit.
What you're referring to, Gary, is that we designed Ms. Pac-Man in 1981, 1982, and entered into a licensing agreement with Midway, who was a North American distributor, and with Namco, who was the owner of the original Pac-Man.
Right.
And video games had their heyday, or the golden age, from 1978 or whatever to 1984, when Atari collapsed. And at that point, our company left the video game business. There was no real business left for us. And right. So we headed off, and we can talk about where we headed later, but we left the industry. 20 years later, Namco, the Japanese company that owned Pac-Man, decided it would be good to put out an anniversary edition of Ms. Pac-Man. And no one was around 20 years before that signed all these marketing agreements and whatever. And it made sense for them just to assume that Ms. Pac-Man was a creation of Namco. So they started it in production, and we saw one out at a arcade or a rest area, or I forget where it was. Mm-hmm. And we called them up and said, "You realize you don't own that game. That was our design, and we're due royalties on it." Right. And I think they thought it was a prank call. So we spent 4 years in arbitration working out the details of how we should get paid. The arcade game was one part of it, but there were things now that were never envisioned 30 years ago. There were games of Ms. Pac-Man being played on cell phones. Right. 30 years ago, there was not even a concept of a cell phone. So in the contract, there were discussions about electronic distribution. And so it fell under electronic distribution, but it was difficult to figure out exactly what was intended by a 1981 contract trying to outline how things would happen 30 years later. So right. a lot of time talking with lawyers and working it all out.
Yep. You then like you said, the company moved on. I found something interesting in the article I did not know about, was because you guys formed General Computer Corporation, which went on to do laser printers and a lot. Like you said, the video game that portion of it, you were ready to kind of move on from, in a sense, as far as your main revenue generating product. But I did not know this. The first internal hard drive for the Macintosh.
Right. So in 1984, 1985, Atari collapsed. And so Atari was our major marketing company. We were licensing our games to Atari. We created 76 games, most of which were licensed to Atari and were sold under the Atari name. Mm-hmm. They pretty much went out of business. They sold the Atari game unit to Jack Tramiel of Commodore. And we looked at it and said, we have to move out of that industry. There's not enough money left in it for us. We had roughly 70 engineers at the time and decided to take on a new direction. Mm-hmm. Well, in 1984, if you remember the Super Bowl, the Apple Macintosh had just been rolled out. Right. They announced the Macintosh in the famous 1984 commercial. And we looked at it and said, why don't we start deploying engineers to developing to this machine? Right. And so we switched the engineers from working on video games to working on products for the Apple Macintosh. And I believe at the time we might have been the largest Apple Macintosh developer. We had people working on games. We had them working on software. And as we were doing all this, we realized that the Macintosh was too slow and did not have enough storage capacity to do our development. So we started hooking up hard drives and hooking them directly to the main microprocessor inside and said, well, we should market this. So we created a product called Hyperdrive, sticking a hard drive inside of a Macintosh. Right. It sold for $2,000 for a 10 megabyte drive, if anybody wants to think about that. We also later had a 20 megabyte drive. And we could kick up the memory, we could speed up the processor. But we got into the hard drive business going inside the Apple Macintosh.
That's awesome. Well, we laugh about it now, but that's a lot. That was a lot of space back then. I had one of those gigantic, you could carry it around in a suitcase Macintoshes. One of my first computer, Apple Macintoshes was this big. It was huge, and at least had a handle on it too. But I had a nice, thing for it. But yeah, that's awesome. And, just incredible stuff. You have a note in here, TV Guide. Tell us a little bit about that one.
So I worked on the Apple Macintosh for quite a few years. We had a large company there making hard disks and laser printers and other products for the Apple Macintosh. Mm-hmm. And then in 1993, I took about half of the employees and started up a new company called Video Guide. And Video Guide was a device that you would hook up to your television and bring TV Guide electronically onto your television. So you could interact with TV Guide, see what was on, set up your VCR to record, and get sports scores, news, and other things. And when we started selling this product through Radio Shack and Best Buys and other stores, and so that was our new business in the mid-90s of selling a product called Video Guide.
That's cool.
A year later, we merged with a public company called Gemstar. It was more, they acquired us because they were the larger company, they were public. And I went on to run the consumer electronics group for Gemstar. And in the year 2000, we purchased TV Guide. So we became Gemstar TV Guide. And so I am responsible for many, many of those interactive guides that you may see on televisions or in cable boxes or TiVos or any of those objects that contain guides. Some of those patents are mine. Some of the engineering is mine, or led the engineers to design that.
Oh man, that's very cool. Because let me tell you, there's nothing better than being able to go to one of those guides and scrolling through and figuring out where everything is. That's a great idea, because
it's hard to remember TV without it.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, you remember that little paperback magazine that sat on your counter that you'd flip through and find the 5 channels at 8 o'clock and say, what's on tonight?
That's right. Or it was in the newspaper somewhere. Sometimes you'd be like, where's today's newspaper? We got to figure out what's on tonight. Yes. All right, we're about to get into we want to get into the geocaching. So, but let's talk a little bit about the restaurants.
Sure. One other business I got involved in, more as a hobby, is restaurants. I'm part owner of several restaurants up in the Boston area, even though I now live in Florida. And the reason I mention this particularly partly because I love food and the restaurants,
right.
but I started up a series of geocaches in the Boston area as a tribute to the great chefs of Boston. That's awesome. So many of the restaurant chefs that I know have had a geocache put out telling their story and often placed near their restaurant, and sometimes themed to who they are or whatever. It's been a little bit difficult. When I put out the series, I did not realize how often people or chefs change restaurants and their story keeps on growing. So in most cases, it's the story of the chef up until the date I publish the cache, and not going back and try keeping it all updated.
Right. It's a neat idea, though, and hope to find some where Susan and I are hoping to go there in August to Boston and visit some family. So I'll kind of try to slip by and see if I'll check on some of those while we're there. So, so you've done also a series of classic game caches. You did several up in Massachusetts and you did some in Florida.
I've done actually two series.
Okay.
I have 20 caches up in Massachusetts dedicated to the classic video games, but down in Florida I now have 45 caches. They are all very well customized to the individual video games. So very often the container has something to do with the video game. The location often has something to do with the video game, and many of them are puzzle ones that have to do with the video game. And so these are put out as a series. When I say a series, they have a leaderboard so you can see how you've done on the series. So people down in Florida compete. I just put one out a day ago, and there are 7 people that are already back at 100% because the leaderboard shows that they have found all 45. And so when I post a new one, everyone goes running out to go get that because they want to be top of the leaderboard. And it's a fascinating way, similar to challenge caches, of being able to drive people to do specific things. And so this series worked out quite well. I originally published one for Pac-Man as my first one, and it got rejected by the reviewer saying that it's commercial based. In some ways they were correct. Pac-Man still sells, and therefore you're promoting a current product. And so this one actually had to be appealed to headquarters and look at what they deem as pop culture. And so all of these video games are out of the 70s and 80s to make sure they're pop culture and not anything current. And so that's why they're the classic video game series, is to make sure they're games out of the 70s and 80s. And there are plenty of games there. Every now and then I actually force finding a game. For example, I was walking through the local CVS store here and saw a Mr. Potato Head. I said, what a great cache container.
Right.
So I had to Google it, and yes, back in the 80s, there was a Mr. Potato Head video game. And so there's now a Mr. Potato Head video game series, or cache in the video game series, with people being reminded to replace the ear or the eye when they go and sign the log.
That's awesome. So Jesse, I saw you kind of perk up there. You talked about a leaderboard. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'm assuming that's on retiredguy.com, right?
Yes, it is.
And I know we're going to get into that, but I've been waiting patiently and quietly, and I'm so excited to hear about your caching trip coming up and some of the caching you do, because you cache like I dream of caching. Like if I had all the time and if I just had my wish and like a little, lamp to rub, you would describe it right here coming up. And I'm excited to hear about this. This is I've been so nice and patient and quiet. I'm just jumping out of my seat over here, and everybody will understand why in just a minute. This is amazing. You just hit a goal that people don't even talk about realistically doing. Everybody says it, but nobody realistically talks about doing this. I don't even know how many people have done it, but do you want to kind of let people in on what you've done recently?
Sure. In January, I cached. I got a geocache on my 7th continent. It was something that
7 continents.
I had worked hard to get to 6, and then for our anniversary, we had a big anniversary this September. My wife mentioned that she would like to do a trip to see either polar bears or penguins. And polar bears, I've already been up north of the Arctic Circle. I've never actually seen a polar bear, but the penguin sounded quite good because it involved me getting down to Antarctica and getting a geocache down there and picking it up as my 7th continent. So off we went, planning a trip to go down to Antarctica, also some Central America, or sorry, South America, Falkland Islands, South Georgia Islands, and ended up 3.5 weeks in January down in the Southern Hemisphere, having a great time.
Not only do I not have the magic lamp, but my wife is very adventurous and goes caching with me. But she's already told me if we ever get the circumstance where I get to go to Antarctica, she'll just see me when I get back, because
she doesn't want any part of that.
Fun, get killed by whatever polar monster is out there, but I'm not going. So,
okay, just to correct you, there are no polar bears in Antarctica.
No, yeah, no
Northern Hemisphere only.
Yeah.
But there'll be some kind of Yeti or something.
Or something.
Yeah.
Yeti.
It's a Yeti. A Yeti's going to come get me.
On Antarctica. Don't know if that's going to happen or not, but all right.
But that's not 7th continent, but it's also, you picked up a few more countries, and there's a bunch of other really amazing stats for this trip, right?
Correct. So the main trip started off us flying into Buenos Aires and then getting on a boat in the southern tip of Argentina, going to Falkland Islands, South Georgia Islands, both of which count as countries, and then on to Antarctica. And so that would have gotten me 4 countries. Not to rest on just getting the 4 countries, when we flew into Buenos Aires, we got in at 6 in the morning. My wife went off to the hotel to take the luggage there and catch a little nap since we just did an overnight flight. I caught the ferry across the bay to Uruguay to get a cache in Uruguay. I actually was able to get to the oldest cache in Uruguay.
Nice.
Fascinating. I speak no Spanish. I arrived from the ferry just assuming I'd grab a taxi and find one that spoke English. But it was working with Google Translate on my phone. I had coverage at least, and telling the taxi cab driver what I was doing, or at least what he thought I was doing. Mm-hmm. He drove me there, waited patiently, and I ran off to get the oldest cache in Uruguay, ran back, hopped back on the ferry, and was there in time for dinner.
Woo-hoo. So that's awesome.
Picked up Uruguay that way. We went up to the falls, Iguazu Falls, up on the very northern tip of Argentina. And the falls are in between Argentina and Brazil. Most of the people on the tour just saw it from the Argentina side, but I decided I need to see both sides of it. Crossed into Brazil to see the falls there, got a geocache while in Brazil.
That's awesome.
Ran across the footbridge to get into Paraguay, since that was right there. It would have been a four-hour wait to get across by car. Because the checkpoint was very, very slow. So I had hired a guide, and he said, let's just abandon the car and walk across. And so we walked across, grabbed a cache, and came back. He thinks I'm crazy, but I picked up Paraguay that way.
You ran to another country.
He did.
We actually walked.
Walked it.
But it was hot. Okay. So all in all, we picked up 8 new countries on the trip, my 7th continent. Once we landed in Buenos Aires, we logged 8,400 miles by plane, by boat, by car, and many, many, many penguins.
Yes, and the penguins may come into play later in the show. So
possibly.
possibly.
How long did you, from very start, deciding you were going to do this trip? How long did you plan this trip?
Probably took about 6 months of planning. What I did not understand at the time was visa requirements into Paraguay and Brazil.
Oh.
Brazil was requiring that they have your passport at the embassy for as long as 20 business days or a month. And so I had to find a blank spot in my travel calendar. I know it sounds harsh, that I could not have my passport for a month and hand it off. So over Christmas, the Brazilian embassy had my passport, and I was quite scared it might come back on their last promise date, which would be the day before we left for the trip. And I did not really have a backup plan of what happens there. Paraguay, however, returns your passport very, very quickly. It was an overnight deal, and I was very impressed. But getting visas definitely added to the complications.
And now, in the notes, you mentioned that you got a special Earth cache during this trip, right?
Yes. I only actually got, I believe, 2 caches in Antarctica. The first one was a physical cache. I try getting at least one physical cache everywhere I go. That feels much better. I don't know exactly why. But there was an Earth cache I really could not pass up. It was called Deception Island Earth Cache. And Deception Island is this fascinating place off the Antarctic Peninsula where it is almost a perfect circle of islands that go around with a little opening, and the ship can go on in. And what you're actually going into is a caldera of a volcano that is still somewhat active. And for some reason, the Earth cache wanted to talk about the fact that this is an active volcano, and hence the water is a little warmer. I think they're kind of misleading things there. It might have been 33 degrees versus 32 and a half or something like that.
That's a little warmer.
Whoa. Hang on a minute. You went into the water there, Doug?
Well, the cache was a 5.5, and I'm looking going, it's an Earth cache. We have a geologist aboard the boat. So I can, if I can't find the answers online, if I can't read about them on the cache, there's obviously no signs on land or anything talking about it. Right. So I figured I'd ask the geologist, and I would get the answers to it. So that could be the difficulty part, but I'm not really sure how I was getting a 5 terrain unless it was the fact that I was getting to there by boat. Then I read about it, and it said requirement number 1, take a photo with you and the volcano in Telephone Bay. Now, that was easy enough. I stood there, did a selfie, got the picture taken. Requirement 2, take a photo of you and the ruins in Whalers Bay. Once again, pretty easy.
No problem.
Number 3, take a photo with you swimming in Pendulum Cove. And this is where
wait a minute.
The water is 33 degrees, and there's a glacier sitting in the back.
Oh, my gosh.
So my wife was up for this. We got up in the morning, started doing shots of tequila, either to warm us up or to act as antifreeze in our body, or liquid courage. I donned a penguin bathing suit just to go with the occasion. Perfect. And we did a polar plunge where we waded out into the water and then dove in and got back on shore as quickly as possible. A very rocky shore or rocky bottom. The reading I had done ahead of time about polar plunges said, be very, very careful. It won't feel that cold because you go numb so fast. But you won't be able to feel the bottom as you're walking, and you can smash your toes on the rocks and everything. So get out quickly.
Oh my gosh.
So we got out quickly, covered ourselves in blankets, did a shot of vodka to warm ourselves back up. There's a couple Russians on board, and they were toasting with the vodka. But we got our smiley. We accomplished the polar plunge. We even got a certificate from the boat.
That is very cool. That's my kind of Earth cache right there.
That's your kind.
Yeah, get rid of the rest of them. Just keep that kind.
Keep that one.
That's
So
right.
if you're playing along at home, it's GC 115 Zone X file, Zone X file, and
so it's come up a couple times in the chat room, and I was going to ask anyway. But are you aware of a webcam in Antarctica? I don't know if you were anywhere close to this at all.
I was far, far, far away.
Oh, okay.
Probably my geography is awful, but probably as far away as New York is from California.
So just right down the street. I mean,
if it's the webcam I'm thinking of, I believe there's a webcam right at the South Pole. If that's the one that they're referring to.
It's never been found.
Yeah, there's never been found.
Then I'm sorry, I don't know where it is. I know there's a cache right
down
at the
there
South
that's
Pole.
never been found. It's watched by like, I don't know,
A lot of people,
thousands of people, but nobody's ever actually been all the way to this webcam, and it's still active. It's been out there for a long time.
Yeah, I think it is, Doug. I think it's on the other side of Antarctica, so it's sort of on the Asian side of, if you want to think of it that way. Whereas you were at the South American portion of Antarctica.
Right. So there's two entry points to South America that most tourists will use. One is going from South America. The other is going from New Zealand. And if you want to get the oldest cache on the Antarctica Peninsula, you go from New Zealand. I did look at that also, and I was nowhere near it.
You can get it on your next trip down there.
Yes.
Well, that may be on his list. We're gonna get into his list here in a minute, but yeah, I was had to put this course in the notes. We were talking about this trip, but so I sent a note to Doug. I was like, "Hey, we're kind of preparing for the April 1st show," and he goes, "Hey, check this out." He sent me the photos. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible!" It's like 33 degree. I would do it, but then I'm thinking, I don't want to do it for very long. That's for sure. Like you said, so
I'm sure you're wanting to get out as soon as you get in.
Other people have done it from the boat, and when you do it from the boat, they have the ship's doctor standing by and tie a rope around your waist. They don't exactly explain why. They haul you back in if you have a heart attack and the doctor's right there or what. But it's a little worrisome.
Right.
I would say so.
He did it probably a much better way. But speaking of great travel, amstravel.sales.com. They have something special for Geocache Talk podcast listeners. They offer a special perk on cruises, tours, hotels, and resort stays over 3 nights. Depending on the travel product you're interested in, we'll take the form of a stateroom credit or a gift card. Just mention you heard about us on the Geocache Talk podcast. When you submit your quote request or on schedule your 15-minute adventure planning session, you can go to amstravelsales.com/page/geocache talk for more details. So,
and I've already got my eye on another part of AMS Travel Sales, the Costa Rica trip, geocaching trip for next year. But we'll talk about that later. We've got too much to talk about tonight, but
we do.
I'm slowly trying to wear down my CFO and talk her into letting us go on that trip. So
travel to Costa.
We'll talk about that some other time.
Yep. We're gonna switch gears now and talk a little bit about challenge caches, because challenge caches are really cool, and Jesse and Doug are both really geeked up about challenge caches. So here we go.
Challenge caches are great, and
I'm getting there.
You're liking them a little bit more now.
I'm liking them more, and I'm getting more excited about them. And when Doug was on the show back on show 28, I went and looked, and it's like, oh, cool. I did qualify for one because I found one of Doug. It's so funny. I found Jesse's Earth cache, which he's not a real fan of his own Earth cache, but I found his Earth cache. I slept, was it 10,000, 9,000, somewhere around there, 9,000 feet?
9 or 10,000 feet.
9 or 10,000 feet. And so I went and looked at yours, and just immediately I found one. It's like, you got to find a cache of more greater than 9,000, whatever it is. I was like, cool, I can do that. So, let's talk about some of the challenge caches that are out there.
Well, the cache you're referring to, I assume, is the 2 Mile High Club.
That's it.
There are 3 different ones that I have out there. One is the 1 Mile High Club. The second is 2 Mile High Club. and the third is 3 Mile High. And to get to 3 Mile High, I used climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with my oldest son, which is 19,320 feet or something like that. So it was well over 3 miles high.
Wow.
So I've talked about it many times on the show. I love challenge caches and stuff, but and I've done some, and I put out a few, but nothing like you have. You've kind of taken it to that next level. You have not only put out a bunch of caches, but you've done some other stuff to go with it too. So kind of tell us how you got that big into challenge caches.
Well, I actually love challenge caches because they give us each an ability to do our own style of geocaching, to look and say, all right, what am I going to do differently? If there was a geocache that said jump in water at 33 degrees or, down at 33 degrees, we'd probably all jump in the water and then claim a challenge cache. What would you do to get a challenge cache? And there are obviously very strict rules on the types of challenges that can be out there. But as you find different challenges you can put out, they really are great at getting people to jump through hoops that they would not do otherwise. And provided they're not overly boring or repetitive, they can cause all kinds of different styles of caching to say, I never thought of that. And I wish I had paid attention to challenges early on, because it would have had me look more for things like the oldest caching countries or states. I just started adding that to my to-do caching list very late, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, of saying, whenever I'm in a state, where's the oldest cache? Should I go to it? Or are there any year 2000 caches around? Because I'd like to get those. And so as I look at the challenges, they often define how I want to geocache a little bit differently than just trying to up my number. I really know I can't compete with some of the big numbers out there of just sheer number of finds. So I look at it in different ways where my travels or other things I care about will lead to fun adventures. And so what we did about 3 or 4 years ago was to say, let's put together a string of challenge caches that can go out as a series where people can actually use it as a way to see how many they can get. And right now, we have 152 challenge caches in what we call the Retired Monkey Challenge Trail. The retired came from my name, Retired Guy. Right. And the monkey came from Cute Little Fuzzy Monkey. That's his actual geocaching name. I apologize. Yes. He is a cacher who now lives in Texas, but helps me with the trail, though neither of us actually have to do the maintenance. So I'll get into that in a minute. So we have 152 caches out there out of about 300 that we have in an entire trail with some geo art and some other things that's there. But 152 different challenges that have been now found 26,000 times of all the caches. But what we had fun doing is creating it as a series, similar to what I did with the video games and with the chefs. We have a leaderboard, and people can compete to see who can have the most of the challenge caches. And we list probably the top 100 people on the leaderboard, and people duke it out to see who can get to the very top, and once again do silly things to just get that next challenge signed off on. And the leaderboard is fun. You get to see who can claim top of it, not necessarily the top cacher, but top challenge cacher as we've defined challenges. And what is fascinating is because two of us were putting out the caches, we have very, very different caching styles. Cute Little Fuzzy Monkey caches often very locally. He originally lived in Florida, now lives in Texas, where I cache throughout the world, as you've heard, and don't stay still for very long. So he is very, very good at having long streaks. I think his streak is up to 13, 14, 1500 at this point of time. My longest streak is 31, back when we had to get 31
August,
souvenirs.
right.
In
Yeah, in that August.
Right.
And on day 32, I said, I'm out of this. I can't handle streaks.
Not anymore. I love it.
So very, very different caching styles. The other fun thing we got to do is we created a verification page. So if you want to see how many of them you already qualify for, you go to this page, and Project GC cranks out your stats against all 152 challenges and tells you you've qualified for number 7, 12, 38, 72, and 181. Sorry, we don't have 181, but
Right.
automatically does the checking for you. And we did this prior to the requirement for checkers.
Right.
We worked really hard also with Sloth 96 up in Boston to get checkers for all of these, so that you could see whether you qualified for each and every cache. And then the verification page was his idea of saying, would it be great if you could just see all of the challenge caches you already qualified for? And so we have the leaderboard, we have the verification page. We send out free path tags to anybody that's attained certain milestones. So when you get 50 of them, you get 75 of them, you get 100 of them, 125 and 150, we have different path tags for each level that we send out that are all the Retired Monkey Challenge Trail path tags. And they start off at bronze and go all the way up to ruby or sapphire. And then I mentioned maintaining. We realized that we wanted to keep this thing perfectly maintained. It is frustrating to have completed a challenge and then not be able to find the cache. And so we started a program that about every 2 months, someone that is going to go do the challenge trail contacts us. They see us on the website, and we put out a note talking about maintenance runs. And we send a repair kit out to them that has 40 preforms, 80 zip ties, 8 Tupperware containers, some stamps for the letter boxes, a whole bunch of logs, instructions based on Project GC, which caches or suspect might need repair, might be a little bit damp, whatever. And so we have set it up such that the maintenance is done roughly every 2 or 3 months by people that are doing the trail anyway. They contact us, we ship out a kit to them, and therefore we've gotten a trail that's been extremely well maintained. And that is something quite important to us. It frustrates me when I go through all the effort of meeting a challenge or solving a mystery and then get there and the cache is not there, missing, in bad shape. So the maintenance is working quite well. I always do have to caution people that it is in Florida along the side of a rural highway. And when it is very, very wet out, the side of the highway fills up with water. And we recommend bringing waders during that time. And people often ask, what do you need waders for? Sometimes you need them all the way up to your thighs to go get the caches. Sometimes they're nice dry park and grabs. But
you never know.
Weather in Florida very much changes how the difficulty rating of each of these caches.
Right. No, you're right.
That's a very cool concept. I've done a lot of challenges and go after them a lot because I like the way it shapes the game and how we cache for a while. But I've never seen anything like this where there's a verification board or a leaderboard and a verification page. I love the leaderboard idea. That just adds a challenge to the challenges, which, you know, anything they put a leaderboard on, I already know I'm coming down there to sign some of these challenges. So. But I hope that catches on, actually. I hope people totally copy you and do that for other challenge trails out there. It would be so convenient and just add something extra to the game. It's a really cool idea.
Well, it's been fun because people really do pay attention to see the completeness they can get on the trail to see which ones are missing, and then go back and say, all right, so to get this, I need to find a cache, an oldest cache in another state, or I have to go find whatever it might be. And so it changes what they're going to do over the next couple of months and gives them a different goal.
I saw the leader currently is Mondo, who is from here in Colorado, and but he's got 149, so nobody has all 152 right now.
No, and this is something that I think it will continue to reflect the two different caching styles that Monkey and I have. That there are certain people that I think easily can get all of his, or certain people that can pretty easily get all of mine. But it tends not to be the same set of people. And all of them are attainable. Back even before it was a requirement, we made sure that we obviously, one of us had met the challenge. But the reviewer down in Florida viewed that the definition of attainable is that at least 10 Floridian cachers have to have the ability or have met that challenge.
Right.
And many of the Floridian cachers are actually snowbirds, and they're down here part of the year, and that doesn't even count. So getting 10 to complete each of them is rather challenging at times. And so some of the challenges got rejected because they were not attainable by the top Floridian cachers.
So can you tell us what challenges got rejected then?
No, because I'll just wait for them to get out there.
I know we were going to get a spoiler right there. I tried.
No,
you can't blame me for trying.
For example, I cannot put out a cache that requires 7 continents yet, because I have to show 10 Floridian cachers that have found caches on all 7 continents. I think right now our top is 5, because even 6 did not qualify. I don't remember whether that's correct or not, but what we often do is we wait, and then over time, as cachers find more continents or whatever, we can add that on in. The other difficulty one, we have a souvenir-based cache, and the requirement out of corporate headquarters is that anybody has to be able to start today and get that number of souvenirs. So you cannot have all the dated ones. You can't have all the event ones. So our highest is 120, I think, souvenirs, because you can only do the geographical ones as souvenirs that can count towards a challenge. So I'm up above 200 souvenirs, but we can't put out a challenge on that because of the ruling.
Right. Yeah. I like what Tom Brotherman, Electric Waterboy, says in the chat room. He says, "I'll never use easy and cute little fuzzy monkey in the same sentence." So I guess maybe his caches aren't necessarily easy, but they're
cute little fuzzy monkey does have a way of putting out some very difficult, particularly mystery caches. He also occasionally takes pride in putting out caches that for years never have any finders.
Oh my gosh!
There is this cache up in Melbourne, Florida, that is at a gazebo that everyone has easy access to. I think Happy Hunter from Sebastian down here has logged 38 DNFs on it already. People have threatened to burn it down, do all kinds of things, but it's been there 3 years. It's this wood structure, and none of us can find it. And cute little fuzzy monkey just smiles.
That's funny. Awesome. So is there some place, you mentioned there's some people that have done the 7 continents besides you. Is there any kind of leaderboard or any place anywhere where you can find out how many people have done that? I've never seen it anywhere.
On that specific one, I don't think so. A lot of the stats are on Project GC. So if you want to see who has the most souvenirs in the world or the most souvenirs in the United States, that can be. I don't think there's a way I know of finding the number of people that have found 7 continents. So when I test out whether I can submit that cache, what I have to do is write a tag or a checker on Project GC, and then start running it off of the top 100 or 200 geocachers in Florida, hoping that 10 of them have gotten to that level. And so that's how I do it. I have to do it by hand right now.
That's when I do my challenge. When I put out challenges, I do the same thing. And I generally have a list of people that I know in my area that'll most likely be qualified for what type of challenge I'm putting out.
Yeah.
So if it's some extreme terrain stuff, or if it's just a bunch or different types, the cachers that are probably going to be at the top of that list by the style anyway. So you have to just put them in by hand. There's no automated way that I've found either.
Correct.
We're gonna talk about the FTF magazine thing here in a minute. Let's continue on with the goals, because I think that kind of fits in better. And so, Doug, we're going to come back to the article, because I'm enjoying that article, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about your goals that you currently have, because I think that's interesting.
Sure. When you asked me up and coming goals, I kind of started listing them out or thinking about them.
Right.
So these were kind of created for the show. I think they were always in the back of my mind, but to try looking at my style of caching and how I keep on working on them. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I'm trying to do is get to my 100th geocaching country. I'm at 90 right now, and I think I can pull it off by the end of the summer. We have a couple of trips planned, one to St. Lucia for scuba diving. And from there, I'm going to leave my wife for a couple of days, hop to Barbados and Trinidad, St. Vincent, Grenada, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, pick up caches in there, and then meet back up and do a little more scuba diving in Barbados with her. Mm-hmm. So do a quick jumping around there. And then I have a trip in late June to Vietnam planned. And during then, I hope to cross into Cambodia and maybe one or two other countries while there. And then I have a wedding in Ireland, and cool. I already have Ireland. It's going to get me to Ulster, though, which is one of the counties there that I do not have the souvenir for, or the only county I don't have the souvenir for. So I will head to Ulster. And then I noticed on a map that the Isle of Man is real close. So I'm going to figure out how to get to the Isle of Man while at that wedding, awesome. And get a new country in the Isle of Man. So that should get me to my 100th geocaching country by the end of the summer, hopefully.
Have you cached in a country that they have not put a souvenir out for yet?
Oh, many, many.
Okay. So you just got to wait on them to put the souvenirs out then.
Yes. And I don't know whether they have intentions of putting them out for all countries. In general, they're putting them out for relatively large population countries with a lot of geocachers in them, or a lot of geocaches. I don't know which. Right. There are a couple bizarre ones. Malta, I haven't gotten near. I'm trying to figure out what trip I might be able to do a side trip to Malta. I had to kind of look, okay, how do you get to Malta? Right. But most of them make sense. And so the only ones I'm missing souvenirs on, and this is my next goal, is to try getting all the geographical souvenirs. And so I'm missing Ulster in Ireland as a county. I'm missing most of Australia. When I was caching, or when I went to Australia, I've only gotten one in Sydney, and that is it. So I've got a ways to go to do a lap around Australia, and Australia is really, really big. I've got Latvia, Finland, Lithuania, Estonia, and I think I could do those in one trip. South Korea, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, which maybe when I'm in Vietnam, I can figure out a way to go visit all those countries. And then I'll be stuck with Malta, and I have to figure out how to get to Malta sometime. So my last one may be Malta, unless they add more to the list. We'll see.
I heard Malta's really gorgeous, by the way. I knew somebody actually went to Malta. So, it may be a good one to end with. It's supposed to be a really gorgeous place. So,
right as I'm about to go to Malta, they will probably add some more and add a really obscure country I've never been close to.
Right. Hey, it makes it fun. So you're talking about oldest caches too before. This is kind of interesting list I think you put together, because this is something that Susan and I like to do, which is if we're in a state, we're like, where is the old, like we went to 14er, the mega, and we're get spends time with Jesse up there, and went to Terryall because it's the oldest cache in Colorado now. We did that in Missouri. We went and grabbed that one. Of course, Texas
Mingo
isn't
too,
too
right?
far. Mingo, oldest cache in Kansas. Yeah. So you have an interesting list here. When I first looked at it, I forgot this is actually a list of oldest geocaches. You've got 52. Well, the first part makes sense. 52 year 2000 geocaches so far. Right.
And there's roughly 115 last I looked at. So I have roughly half of them. And I've really made it now that if I'm anywhere in the general area, I will go get that year 2000 cache. And I wish I was doing this years ago because I cached real close to many of these. And boy, I wish I had just climbed that mountain.
Geocaching regrets. We always talk about that, Jesse, don't we? We're just like, oh.
Absolutely.
Jesse's found a few obscure places, but you've got 28 U.S. states, not just the state, but we're talking about the oldest. So you've got 28 of the oldest caches in those U.S. states. 28
Correct.
of them.
So what I did is I created in iCaching a couple of lists. The oldest cache in each state and the oldest cache in each country. And then whenever I'm traveling anywhere, I bring up that map and I see, oh, I'm really, really close to the oldest cache of so-and-so. And I also have all the year 2000 caches there. And so they create my detours on a trip so that I will go get the oldest in a state or oldest in the country. So I've got right now 28 different states that I've gotten the oldest one in. I've gotten 26 different countries. And I keep on always looking as I go to a country, where's the oldest one? If I'm bothering to enter that country, is the oldest one only 10 miles more, or is it on the far other side of Antarctica?
Right there, like in that case, yeah. But that's now. What you mentioned something? What are you using for that, Doug? To iCache?
iCaching, where I have a couple lists that I brought into it.
Is that a website?
So I have, it's an app I run on my Macintosh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. Okay, very cool.
And so it really helps me visually just look at some of my travels. So I use it for as I go into an area, a country, a state, or whatever, and make sure I'm not going to miss a year 2000 cache or oldest in or whatever.
Well, that's
cool. So I use it for that.
Yeah. And then oldest cache, you get four continents.
Yeah,
another 5 this year.
Another big regret. I was in Dublin drinking beer at the Guinness factory with my brother, and I think that's about 15 miles from the oldest in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
Now we'll be back in Galway, Ireland for a wedding this summer, and yes, I'll drive across to Dublin and finally get oldest in 5 continents.
That's awesome.
So I'll be missing 2, but I'm still plugging along.
Right. You're doing great. Yeah. Then Jesse, you got something you wanted to bring up
from the chat room. Owen from KC, I think it was a few discussion points back, but he said,
"That's all right.
Are you aware of GC105E, which is called conch shell horn? It's not found yet, from 2001. It's on a small island of Venezuela near Grenada."
I am not heading there on this trip. When I was looking at going in and out of Grenada, my flight plans had me 4 hours in Grenada. I did look at that cache and started drooling a little bit, but could not figure out a reasonable way to get there. It is on my list for maybe going to try at some point, but I'm not going to probably make it on this trip.
That's got to be one of the oldest unfound caches out there.
Yeah, I have not done much research on it. I did see it and said, is it even worth doing the research on and whatever? And I can't get to it on this trip, so I've got some scuba diving to do.
That would be a pretty impressive feat too. But you can only get to what you can get to, right? You can't get to everything at one time. But
yeah. And so a couple other things you're going to do as far as on the challenge side of things, you're hoping to get to increase the retired monkey challenge trail. You want to try to get to 175. That's quite a few though this year. That's not really maybe this year's goal, but you just want to try to get it to 175, you think, Doug? Or
and maybe this year.
Okay.
There are a couple ways we can do it. Both Monkey and I have done more caching, so we've qualified for more things, and so we'll probably find some new challenges that we'll add and boost the number through that. We've also brought on a third partner, Sloth 96 from Boston, who has been doing a lot of the programming for us, both of the actual checkers and the verification page, and helping automate the leaderboard and things like that. And I'm about to turn him loose on his caching style. And he loves collecting counties and weird stuff like that. So by the time we're done, it will be interesting to see what challenge caches he puts out that I know I will not qualify for. So it'll be interesting.
Right.
Very cool.
And then you want to increase, of course, the video game classic series. Sounds really cool to add a few more to that, make it up to 50.
Yeah, I view it's kind of fun to put out one every month or two, and it causes everybody that's at the very top of the leaderboard to go racing out to get back to the top of the leaderboard. So one published yesterday for Galaxion, if you remember that game.
Great game. Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. I love that game.
And I got a nice miniature Galaxion cabinet that is now strapped with zip ties to something, and in the bottom of it is a preform that's been inserted inside, and it's a nice little container.
That's awesome. We're going to do before we get into, I want to talk a little bit about the article that's going to come out in the April FTF magazine. One of our great sponsors of Geocache Talk is FTF magazine. In fact, Keith's going to be on the show in a few weeks, so looking forward to that. But we're going to do a couple things. I'm going to give away a coin live here. So get your fingers ready, folks. Get ready in the chat room to answer the question I'm going to give you. And so here it comes. The question is, how many countries has Doug found a geocache in so far? So put your answers in the chat room. While we're waiting for the answers there, I will mention that we have an Instagram winner because we had a special giveaway on the Instagram. And the winner of that...
we already got a winner.
Oh, Walter.
Yeah, 3 of them jumped in, almost 4. Several people jumped in at the same time, but Walter was first.
Walter, the geocaching ham, wins the win. So, Walter, send me, I think I already have it somewhere, but send me your address and I will get that information to Doug so he can send you a coin. So
people were apparently paying attention because 15 people jumped on immediately.
They dove onto that. Curiosity Girl, good try. She did continents, which is really cool.
Oh. That's just too fast. Typing too fast is what it was.
I know. Houston TX Dave was like, well, I'll try 91 since everybody put 90, but that's coming up hopefully, very soon. But so I do want to mention our Instagram winner. This again, we had 110 entries for that coin, and Rebecca Joyner won that one. I don't know if she made it into the chat room tonight. What's funny was I sent her a note and I go, hey, you gonna watch the show tonight? Because I've been sick. I'm gonna definitely try to watch the show. I go, okay. That's all I said. I didn't want to give too much away, but I was like, hey, you might want to catch tonight's show, Rebecca. Because when the contest first came out, Doug, she was like, oh my gosh, I want that coin so bad. I was like, well, enter a contest, you may win. So, and then lastly, we've got one more. Doug Doug was gracious to give us. We've got 3 to give away. So I'll get you also, Doug, Rebecca's information. She's in North Carolina, so she's not too far away from you, and I'll get her address for you to send off. We have one last one to give away, and that's for our audio listeners. So if you're listening to this show tomorrow, which I got a note from somebody who lives in Great Britain who wasn't going to make it tonight, but they were going to listen tomorrow. And if you're listening anytime between now and Saturday, which would be April 7th, by midnight on April 7th, you will need to have sent in your answer to this question, which is on retiredguy.com. Doug mentions the number of penguins he encountered on his Antarctica trip. What is the exact number he counted? And I don't know how you did this, Doug, but you counted exactly a certain amount and put it on the website. So go check out retiredguy.com and send us to geocachetalk@gmail.com the answer to that question. And as we sort of get to the point of wrapping up tonight, Doug, you even have it right pretty close by to you, I think, is the FTF magazine article. There it is right there. He's got it. It's not even out yet. It's not even made the presses yet, Doug, and you've got one in your hand. It's awesome. Well, you've got a copy of it.
Yeah, I printed out the PDF that Keith sent out. But
yeah, but it's a fascinating article. So talk a little bit about how that why geocachers make great mates.
So on a trip that I went on a year ago to Southern Africa, by the way, I picked up 8 countries then.
That's awesome.
My wife and I, retired girl, went with another couple, and the other couple have been our marriage mentors over our many, many years of marriage, Paul and Virginia Friesen. And they, I think, have claimed 25 or 30 geocaches in their career. So they understand geocaching, but not much. But they're always up for an adventure. So when we landed in Johannesburg, the first thing I did was rent a car. My wife went to the hotel, rent a car, and ran off to go see Swaziland. And it was something that was being done to go get a geocache. And it started a conversation about how driven geocaching people are. And over dinner that night, we had the discussion, is geocaching good or bad? Does it affect marriages? Because that's what they're concerned about. That's what they do as a profession. And I have defended video games before. I defended television. I defended lots of hobbies and say the hobby itself is not necessarily good or bad in terms of a marriage or anything else. But you have to be very, very careful about taking it to an excess. How much are you paying attention to your wife when you're running off at 6 a.m. to go geocaching? Right. And that could be the same thing about golf or anything else. And so we started talking about how do you know where the boundaries are and whatever. And so the article was first going to be, how not to be a geocacher that's hurting their marriage. And it was an awful topic. You were going to scold everybody for spending large amounts of time racing off to get an FTF when they were supposed to do the dishes or whatever it might be. And that would not be a fun article. And I don't think people need to be reprimanded for that, because I do that also. So instead, we took a look at what geocachers do, what their drive is, what their passion is, and make suggestions about saying, can you take the same energy that we put into geocaching, the same creativity, and also put that time in on our marriage? And so it turned out to be a wonderful article. It is probably a bit long, but we had a lot of content. And so Paul and Virginia, particularly Paul, drafted this where it asks why geocachers can make great mates, and talks about all the characteristics of us, these rabid geocachers, and how we have such persistence, drive, creativity, and reminds us that we should also be applying that towards our marriages and points out different ways we could be doing such things. So it was a fun article. I collaborated with Paul on this in trying to correct some of the geocaching stuff. He did not exactly understand terms like phone a friend and whatever. So he's saying, so you're no, you're phoning a friend. Yeah, whatever. And correcting him on the terms and all that. But we were together in South Africa for 2.5 weeks, and he observed my obsession and wrote an article about it and how it can affect marriages. So a fun article that we put together, and it's in this month's FTF magazine.
Yeah, it's a great read. I've read part of it. I definitely want to finish reading because so far I've gotten a real kick out of it, because I think, Doug, what's great about this article is some great advice and some great idea. Some, like he's talking about marriage items, marriage things that you guys talk about in there, the creativity and different things. But his observing you geocaching it's awesome, because it's like, so Doug went and he did this, and it's like, I can't believe we did this, and so it's great.
As he was writing the stories, I just said, well, this will resonate with all geocachers because they're all just as crazy as I am.
Exactly. And it was fun. So far the read's been great. So yes,
I'm looking forward to reading that one.
Yeah, because Susan and I, we geocache together, and Jesse, he goes out with his wife and kiddos geocaching. So there is a lot to and it definitely resonates, I think, also with people that aren't married, because there are things in there that talk about just really their characteristics that we should all sort of we need to all have, really qualities in our life, our willingness to seek assistance, there's different things that I think there are qualities, Doug, in that article that I think are really sort of transcend wherever you're at relationship wise.
I hope people enjoy reading it. I'm sure you'll all read it and relate, saying, yeah, I've done that too.
Yes.
So, realize what strengths you have in geocaching and look at ways to apply that to your marriage or your relationship.
Absolutely. Yep. And so last thing, I think you are, and we didn't really get a chance to really kind of go through this beforehand, but are you still planning to go to Geo Woodstock this year?
Yes, I'm planning on going. I have not booked anything yet, but
okay.
I'll be there.
Planning on, oh, that's awesome. So we'll get to see each other and talk a little bit, and looking forward to that. And again, thanks, Doug, for being on the show tonight. Just love hearing the stories, and I think everybody else does too. We always get great feedback from your experiences. So again, thank you so much. Jesse, do you have a final thing you wanted to mention, or?
Yeah, just we've talked about it on here, and I want to make sure we didn't gloss over it. Go to Retired Guy, and go to his website, go to retiredguy.com, and check out the leaderboard, check out the verification page. That is like the gold standard for challenge trails, and that's great. If you're into challenges, you're going to absolutely love that page. I've been being distracted by playing with it the whole time so far tonight.
Right.
Thinking, when do I get down to Florida next? Because that's great. The leader, I mean, that just adds a whole different, challenges already add something to geocaching, and you've taken it to another level, which is even more fun. So I hope everybody goes and checks that out, whether they're going to be in Florida anytime soon or not, just to see how that works. That's great. So thanks for adding that extra challenge to the challenges. That's very cool.
We definitely enjoy it.
Yep. So coming up on the show next week, Ryan Semmel is going to be on. He was going to talk about the National Trails System Act, which is the 50th anniversary of the National Trail System. And so he's going to be on, and we have a special guest with him as well, who's part of that, involved with the National Trail System. As we mentioned before, Keith Petrus, FTF Magazine, he's going to be on in 2 weeks, and he's going to talk about how FTF Magazine survived a hurricane, and other stuff, because he's got some new stuff coming out within the magazine that we're going to talk about. Just Keith also is kind of fascinating. I got to sit down with him And Jesse got to talk to him too a little bit. We got to see him at the Texas Challenge, Texas Mega. And so I actually got to sit down and talk with Keith a little bit about his trip to Spain. And so it's been really good to talk to him. And we just love FTF Magazine and really just wonderful sponsors that we have. In 3 weeks, we're going to have on Nathan Lewis. He just finished a county trip. The reason I say that is because he went all the way out to the Yuma Mega, but his plan was to just do counties along the way, and he tweeted out his whole trip. So we're going to talk about his planning of trying to find a cache in every county as he went through Texas all the way to Arizona, and then when he came back, he went through Oklahoma, and just the process of what he went through to even plan to do that and not leave a hole behind, which is something that I tend to do. Is we'll find caches and they're like, oh, and they'll leave. So
I'm guilty of that too.
so if anybody looks at my county, because I'm trying to get, Susan and I want to really trying to work on all the counties in Texas, but if you look at it, my finds in Texas are such a mishmash of counties. People are going like, you didn't even try to find stuff in consecutive counties. Like, no, I didn't. I should have. But anyway. All right. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Email us your comments at geocachetalk@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Geocache Talk. Mine's at Gary Slinkard. We're also on Instagram, Geocache Talk, just one word, and Memphis Mafia, all one word. I guess that's how that works on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Jesse, you're more of the Instagram expert. And our Facebook page is, of course, facebook.com/Geocache Talk. Show can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Podcastpedia. You look around, you can probably find it. Also, you can find it on Spotify now. And, of course, on our Geocache Talk website, you can find stuff there. So don't forget to click on that subscribe button below. And that's a good way to get a reminder of when the show's going to be on a weekly basis, and tell your friends about the show. We really are trying to, of course, expand viewership and listenership, if that's a word. So definitely tell people about it. So that's important for us to get the word out. So, and until next week, don't just talk about geocaching. Do what Doug does, and that is go geocaching. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.